Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Melissa Siegel. I'm a professor of migration studies, and this is a channel about all things migration. And today we're going to continue with our migration snapshot series, where we zoom in on a specific country in the European Union and look at the migration situation in that country right now. And we do this using the Knowledge Center on Migration and Demography's Atlas of Migration, which comes from the European Commission. Now today we're going to be looking at Hungary. So Hungary is our key case study for today. And in the Hungarian context, we'll be looking at the population of emigrants and immigrants, residence permits and visas issued, asylum applications. We'll even look at one measure of irregular migration or irregular migrants in the country. We'll also look at citizenship and naturalization, as well as some indicators of social inclusion. And we'll also try to look at education and some indicators of employment, although there is some data missing there. So let's jump right in and get started by first looking at the population of Hungary. So the Hungarian population is close to 10 million people, and there are very few non-Hungarian citizens actually in the country. So if we look at both non-EU and EU migrants together, you see that this makes up around 2% of the population. So very, very low numbers of immigrants in the country, which is actually quite interesting because Hungary in general is known for taking quite an anti-immigrant stance, and is known for perhaps having some more xenophobic tendencies and being anti-immigrant, asylum seeker to a large extent. So it's interesting to also see that there are already so few immigrants in the country. And we'll come back to these points also a bit later. Now, if we look at the difference between stocks and flows, so stocks in the country are around 2% of the population. We can also look at flows in 2018. And if you're interested to learn more on the difference between migrant stocks and migrant flows, you can check out my video on that here. I'll also make sure to link it down in the description below. So here we have data on the annual flows of migrants in 2018, and that is looking at the number of people who entered or left the country in a specific year. So in this case, in 2018. And if we first look at immigration, so those are people entering Hungary, we can see that around 83,000 people entered Hungary in 2018, with slightly more than half of these coming from inside the EU and 46% coming from outside of the EU. Now, if we look at emigration, or people leaving Hungary, we can see that around 48,000 people left Hungary in this same period, and around 19% of those went outside of the EU, and the rest, 81%, went within the EU. Now, if we look at first residence permits or valid residence permits during the years, we can also see here between 2017 and 2020 that the majority of, or a good chunk of the residence permits that were issued were for work reasons, with a little bit for education, a little bit for family reasons, and then also another share for other reasons. So this is probably asylum seekers, refugees, etc. But again, remember the numbers of people that are concerned here are quite small. So if we actually look at asylum and first-time asylum applications, you can see here that they have been gradually decreasing over time. So in 2017, they had around 3,000 applications, and in 2020, only 90. So, and already from 2018, 635. So these are actually very low numbers compared to other parts of the EU. And we know that Hungary has taken quite a stance where they do not want to receive asylum seekers. So it also makes sense that they took on fewer and fewer applications throughout time. If we also look at the first instance decisions, you can see also that a majority of the first instance decisions were also negative decisions. So almost 70% in 2017, 92% of negative decisions in 2019. There were a few that have been accepted on Geneva Convention grounds or other types of protection, but this is really a minority of the cases. Now, if we also look at one measure of irregular migration, we can look at the number of people who are ordered to leave the country, so they do not have the right to stay in Hungary in a given year, compared to the number of people that actually left the country in that year. And what we can see is that return rates or leaving rates are very, very low in Hungary. So between 2017 and 2020, we can see that anywhere between 8% and 25% of the people that were actually told they did not have the right to stay in Hungary actually left the country. So the difference in those numbers then we can assume would be people that ended up in some kind of irregular status in the country. Now we can also turn to look at naturalization and citizenship. And what's quite interesting in Hungary compared to other countries is that we actually see more EU immigrants applying for citizenship and gaining citizenship than non-EU immigrants. And this is quite different than in other countries because in general, European citizens already have very similar rights to Hungarian citizens, but we're still seeing a higher rate of citizenship acquisition. And of course, if you want to check out some of the other snapshots in this series and see some of those differences, you can check them out here. I'll also make sure to link the playlist below because this is quite a different situation compared to what we see in other countries. You can also see the share of foreign citizens who have acquired citizenship. So again, it's not, really large numbers here either. So we're seeing, around maybe 5% of foreign citizens actually acquiring citizenship, and again, still more EU citizens. Now we can also turn and look at some indicators of social inclusion with regard to migrants in the country. And the first thing that we can look at is the net income in the country. And what we actually see is that EU immigrants seem to have higher incomes than nationals in general. Again, you have to remember, though, that these are very low numbers of people for us to be doing the comparisons on. If we look also at overcrowding and the risks of poverty or social exclusion, we only have data here on EU citizens, not non-EU citizens. And what we see is that both with regard to overcrowding and risks of poverty and social exclusion, we see that EU citizens have a lower rate of overcrowding and a lower risk of poverty and social exclusion. Now, if we look at educational attainment of the population in 2020, we can see the difference here between Hungarian nationals, EU nationals, and non-EU nationals. And what's interesting to see is that in general, immigrants have higher levels of education than the nationals in the country. You can see this especially for non-EU immigrants, where over 50% of the population actually has high level of education, compared to only 27% of the national population and close to 40% of the EU population. Now, if we look at employment and labor market outcomes, here again, we're missing quite a lot of data, but if we just look at the employment rates, we can see it particularly in that important working age population between 25 and 49. You can actually see here that there are quite high rates of employment, and that we see even slightly higher rates of employment amongst non-EU citizens compared to EU citizens and nationals, at least if we're looking at men. We don't have very much data for the rest. If we also break this down by education level, again, we don't have a lot of data here, but at least if we look at the high levels of education, we also don't see big differences here in the groups. So we see quite a similar profile between nationals, EU nationals, and non-EU nationals with regard to their employment rates, and they are generally very high rates of employment. Now, I hope that just gave you a very quick look at the migration situation in Hungary today, at least of those who are currently based in Hungary. If you would like to learn more, of course, you can check out our other countries in the series. But if you like this video, of course, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to this channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my videos that I upload every week on this channel on a range of different migration issues. And I do hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.